Hello students, myself Dr. Ruhi. I welcome you all for my online classes on the topic DUB, which is dysfunctional uterine bleeding. So coming to the definition, DUB is defined as a state of abnormal uterine bleeding. It is a state, it is one type of AUB itself without any clinically detectable organic, systemic and iatrogenic causes, that is pelvic pathology, example the tumors, inflammation or pregnancy is to be excluded. So we have seen the different causes of AUB there, like palm coin classification we have seen there, FP for different things we have seen, no, pelvic pathology, polyps, etc. So here if the bleeding is there but you cannot detect its organic, systemic and iatrogenic causes, that means organic causes means there is no pelvic pathology, and systemic means she is not suffering from any systemic disorders related with any hematological disorders, any endocrinal problems, any thyroid problems, etc. Iatrogenic means there is no contraception history like insertion of copper T, etc. Then no, but the bleeding is occurring without any causes, then that such type of bleeding, such type of abnormal uterine bleeding is to be termed as AUB. There is one more word which is called as heavy menstrual bleeding. How you can say the bleeding is heavy? The definition is heavy menstrual bleeding is defined as a bleeding that interferes with women's physical, emotional, social and maternal quality of life. DUB is a cause of AUB. In DUB, there is no any clinically detectable organic pelvic pathology like tumor, inflammation or pregnancy. So when there is no any detectable organic, systemic and iatrogenic causes, but the bleeding is of abnormal type, then such bleeding is to be termed as DUB or dysfunctional uterine bleeding. Coming to its incidence, the prevalence varies, but the incidence of 10% among its new patient attending the outpatient department. The bleeding may be abnormal in frequency, amount, duration or combination of any three. So how to diagnose this type of bleeding? A question arises, how will diagnose this condition as DUB? As a diagnosis is based on the exclusion of organic lesion, or with the care and facilities to exclude such a lesion, the incidence varies. So here the diagnosis is to exclude the organic lesion. We have to exclude the cause. If there is no polyps, no tumors, no uterine fibroid, no any hematological disorders, if she is not suffering from any systemic endocrinal disorders, any other causes which we have mentioned under this thing. So if there is no any organic causes, no pelvic pathology mainly, then no endometriosis, no adenomyosis, etc. cases, then you can call such type of bleeding as DUB or dysfunction uterine bleeding. So the diagnosis is based with the exclusion of organic lesion. So you have to exclude, you have to go for investigation and you have to exclude, go for ultrasonography, go for hysteroscopy and other methods, MRI and all, to exclude the cause. If there is no any pelvic organic systemic cause, then you can say this type of bleeding as DUB or dysfunctional uterine bleeding. Next, coming to its pathophysiology. The physiological mechanism of hemostasis in normal menstruation are, as this is a hemostasis mechanism which occurs in a normal menstruation. As you know, the platelet adhesion formation should be there to control the bleeding, formation of platelet plug with the fibrin to seal the bleeding vessels. There should be formation of platelet plug with fibrin, and localized vasoconstriction should be there. Whenever vasoconstriction occurs, then the what happens, the muscle in between the muscle fibers, the arteries are enclosed or they are sealed so that the bleeding is prevented. Regeneration of endometrium, yes, one of the cause of to stop the bleeding is the endometrium should start regenerating. So the regeneration starts before the stoppage of the menstrual cycle itself. So usually on the third day of the bleeding phase itself, the endometrium regeneration completes. So regeneration of endometrium is one of the factor to control the bleeding. Okay. Next is biochemical mechanism involved are increased endometrial ratio of PGF2 alpha by PGE2. Because PGF2 is a vasoconstrictor and introduces the bleeding. So PGF2 alpha is a vasoconstrictor. So whenever the ratio of PGF2 alpha, these are the prostaglandins. So whenever the ratio of PGF2 alpha increases, it controls the bleeding. So these are the physiological mechanisms how to control the bleeding, how the bleeding gets controlled in the normal menstruation. So progesterone increases the level of PGF2 from the arachidonic acid. You know the progesterone is necessary for the release of PGF2 alpha. This is a prostaglandin which acts as a vasoconstrictor. Level of endothelin, which is a powerful vasoconstrictor, is also increased. And in the anovulatory DUB, there is decreased synthesis of PGF2 alpha and the ratio of PGF2 to PGE2 is low. So here what happens in a DUB, especially in an anovulatory type of DUB. DUB are of two types, ovulatory and anovulatory. In anovulatory DUB, what happens? The synthesis of PGF2 alpha reduces. Thus, the ratio of PGF2 alpha by PGE2 is low. Thus, the vasoconstricted effect is hindered, leading to excessive bleeding in the cases of DUB. Anovulatory cycles are usually not associated with dysmenorrhea as the level of PGF2 alpha is low. So the women with menorrhagia have low level of thromboxane in the endometrium. So usually the anovulatory cycles where heavy bleeding is there, they are not associated with dysmenorrhea because again the PGF2 alpha is low. This prostaglandin is a vasoconstrictor. Along with that, it causes a myometrial contraction. So whenever the contraction occurs, that time there will be pain. So here the painful contractions are not seen because prostaglandin level is low in cases of anovulatory cycles. The endometrial abnormalities may be primary or secondary to incoordination in the HPO axis. So here what happens, the endometrial abnormalities are seen which may be primary or secondary due to incoordination of the HPO axis. Because of the hypothalamo-pituitary axis incoordination, there will be abnormalities in the endometrium, and this is this is more prevalent in the extremes of the reproductive period like in adolescence, premenopause or following childbirth and abortion. Even emotional influences, worries, anxieties or sexual problems sometimes are enough to disturb the normal hormonal balance. So here what happens, there is incoordination in the HPO axis. It's usually seen in the extremes of the age or because of any psychological problems leading to the endometrial abnormalities causing excessive bleeding. Next. The abnormal bleeding may be associated with or without ovulation, and accordingly it is grouped into two types, ovular bleeding and anovular bleeding. So here the DUB can be classified into two types, ovular bleeding and anovular bleeding. So here usually the anovular bleeding is more, that is 80% of the DUB cases presents with an anovulation, whereas only 20% of the cases are with ovulation. So ovular bleeding is very less common, whereas anovular bleeding is more common in cases of DUB. So coming to each variety one by one. Coming to the ovular bleeding has different variants. There may be polymenorrhea, there may be oligomenorrhea, and there may be functional menorrhagia. So oligomenorrhea, polymenorrhea is coming to the ovular bleeding. So first is polymenorrhea or polymenorrhagia. As you know, the polymenorrhea is nothing but here the frequent cycles comes less than 21 days within. So usually this is seen in the extreme of the ages and following childbirth, abortion, during adolescence, premenopausal period, and in PID cases. Here what happens is, as you know, the menstrual cycle is divided into two phases. The first is the follicular phase. First half is the follicular phase and another half is the luteal phase. So here what happens is, usually the follicular phase, that is the first 14 days or first half of the cycle, is speeded up with resulting in the shortening of the follicular phase. Here the follicular phase is shortened, that is it is less than 14 days. Okay, so this is probably due to hyperstimulation of the follicular growth by FSH. Because of the hyperstimulation of follicular growth by FSH, that means even before in the usually it takes 14 days for the formation of a matured Graafian follicle, and on the 14th day ovulation occurs. But here the Graafian follicle is matured before the 14 days, means early only it gets mature. So here the shortening of the follicular phase occurs. So this is the main the reason behind the polymenorrhea. But sometimes, rarely, the luteal phase is also shortened due to premature lysis of the carpus luteum. Sometimes it is stress induced stimulation. So if you go for endometrial study, if you take a sample of endometrium and go for observation prior to or within few hours of menstruation, then you will find it is in the secretory changes of the endometrium. You can see if you go for the endometrial study in the case of polymenorrhea, usually of anovular type. The second variation of the anovular bleeding is oligomenorrhea. Oligomenorrhea, as you know, oligomenorrhea means cycles comes for more than 35 days apart. Okay, so less frequent cycles, you can say. Primary ovular oligomenorrhea is rare. It is maybe met in the adolescence age or preceding menopause, that is before reaching menopause. Here the disturbances may be due to ovarian unresponsiveness to FSH. FSH is there but ovaries are not responding to the follicular stimulating hormone, or maybe because of secondary to pituitary dysfunction. That means pituitary is not producing the proper gonadotrophins FSH and LH, and there is undue prolongation of the proliferative phase with normal secretory phase. Here proliferative phase is prolonged, whereas secretory phase is normal. If you go for the endometrial study prior to or within few hours of menstruation, it also reveals the secretory changes. So next variation, which is very important, is functional menorrhagia. Functional menorrhagia. Ovular menorrhagia is quite uncommon. Again, I am telling, the heavy bleeding because of ovulation is, in cases of DUB, is very uncommon. And there are two varieties of functional menorrhagia. One is because of irregular shedding of the endometrium, and second one is because of irregular ripening of the endometrium. First is because of irregular shedding of the endometrium, and another one is because of irregular ripening of the endometrium. So the abnormality is usually met in the extreme of the ages again. So normal regeneration of the endometrium is completed by the end of 3rd day of menstruation. In irregular shedding, desquamation is continued for a variable period. Here what happens in irregular shedding, the desquamation is continued for a variable period with simultaneous failure of regeneration of the endometrium. So regeneration is not occurring but desquamation is continuing here. So in cases of irregular shedding, what happens in shedding, first all the endometrium should go for shedding, then there will be regeneration, but here failure of regeneration with desquamation occurs. And the possible explanation is why it occurs is because of incomplete withdrawal of LH even on the 26th day of the cycle. LH is supposed to be withdrawal, but here what happened, LH secretion is continuing even on the 26th day of the cycle, leading to incomplete atrophy of the carpus luteum. Carpus luteum is not getting degeneration, it is in an incomplete degeneration of the carpus luteum occurs, leading to persistent secretion of progesterone. As you know, carpus luteum is maintained by LH hormone. So LH is continuously secreting, then carpus luteum degeneration will not occur. And so whenever the carpus luteum degeneration doesn't occur, whenever the carpus luteum stays, then what happened, it secretes progesterone hormone. So here progesterone is continuing. And another probable explanation is persistent LH leading to inhibition of follicle stimulating hormone, which causes suppression or ripening, which suppresses the ripening of the follicle in the next cycle. So LH is there, so no FSH will come. If FSH will not come, then what happens, the next cycle follicle ripening will not occur, leading to less estrogen and less regeneration, because estrogen is needed for the regeneration of the endometrium. So when an estrogen is secreted from the follicles, but here what happened, there is no follicle stimulating hormone, follicles are not getting stimulated by the FSH. So when follicles growth will not occur, then there will not be a secretion of estrogen, and estrogen is needed for the regeneration. So here estrogen is less, so less regeneration of the endometrium occurs. So if you go for the endometrial sampling, which is performed after 5th or 6th day of the onset of menstruation, it reveals a mixture of secretory as well as a proliferative endometrium. So if you go for the endometrial sampling, you will find a mixture of secretory as well as a proliferative endometrium, and there is total absence of any surface epithelium. So this type of endometrial sampling you will find. Next is the irregular ripening of the endometrium. So what happens here, how the irregular ripening occurs? So there is poor formation or inadequate function of the corpus luteum. Here what happens, corpus luteum is not properly formed in this case. So thus what happens, the secretion of both the hormones estrogen and progesterone is inadequate to support the endometrial growth. So as there is poor formation of corpus luteum, this corpus luteum function is not proper. Corpus luteum function is to secrete the hormone progesterone and a little amount of estrogen. So here you will not find progesterone as well as estrogen, which is inadequate to support the endometrial growth. As such, what happened, the slight bleeding occurs and continues prior to the start of proper flow. So before starting the proper bleeding or menstruation phase, there will be slight bleeding here in this case. The endocrine profile in the luteal phase shows low level of urinary pregnenolone less than 3 mg and plasma progesterone level less than 5 mg per ml. That means if you go for urinary progesterone as well as in the plasma progesterone, both the levels of progesterones are reduced here in this case, because corpus luteum is not properly formed. Thus the progesterone levels, the endocrine profiling, if you go for endocrine profile, you will find the less quantity of progesterone. An endometrial study prior to or soon after spotting reveals patchy area of secretory changes amidst the proliferative endometrium. So you will find the proliferative endometrium, and in between the proliferative endometrium you will find the patchy areas of secretory endometrium. So secretory changes will be there, patchy areas, but mainly the proliferative endometrium you will find, and in between some patches will be there, and in those patches you will find the secretory changes of the endometrium. So this is all about irregular ripening of the endometrium. So these are the two variants of the functional menorrhagia, irregular shedding and irregular ripening of the endometrium. Next, coming to the anovular bleeding. Anovular bleeding in the DUB is very common. It causes for around 80% of the DUB cases. Ovular bleeding is less common, only 20% you can say, but here anovular bleeding is very common. It is around 80% of the DUB cases. So anovular bleeding has two variants, menorrhagia, and another one is cystic glandular hyperplasia, or also called as metropathia hemorrhagica. First we will come study about the menorrhagia. As you know, menorrhagia is excessive bleeding in amount and duration. It is a cyclic bleeding with normal intervals. So here anovular bleeding is usually excessive in the absence of growth limiting progesterone due to anovulation. See, whenever the ovulation doesn't occur, or in an anovulatory cycle, there is no formation of corpus luteum. So whenever the corpus luteum is not formed, the progesterone secretion is less. So you can say there is no progesterone, you can say. So when the progesterone is not there, the endometrium growth is under the influence of estrogen throughout the cycle. So estrogen, unopposed estrogen will be there, which is causing the endometrial growth continuously, and there is inadequate structural stromal support, and the endometrium remains fragile. Okay, because of the structural support is less to the endometrium remains very fragile or very delicate. Thus, with the withdrawal of estrogen due to negative feedback action of FSH, what happens, the endometrial shedding continues for a longer period in an asynchronous sequence because of lack of compactness. So what happens, whenever the withdrawal of this estrogen occurs, it is producing only the endometrial growth. So what happens, when the estrogen is withdrawal because of the negative action of FSH, it leads to the endometrial shedding which for a longer period in an asynchronous sequence because of lack of compactness. So second variety of this is cystic glandular hyperplasia, also called as metropathia hemorrhagica. This type of abnormal bleeding is usually met in an premenopausal women. So before reaching the menopause, in those ladies, this type of metropathia hemorrhagica or cystic glandular hyperplasia type of bleeding is very common. So the basic fault may lies in the ovary, or may be due to the disturbances of the rhythmic secretion of gonadotropins. So here the fault may be in the ovaries, because as you know, as per the age, the follicle content of the ovary reduces. Okay, and one more thing is follicles become resistant to the gonadotropins, and one more thing is the rhythmic secretion of gonadotropins is also disturbed. So there is slow increase in the secretion of estrogen, but no negative feedback inhibition of FSH. So the net effect is gradual rise in the level of estrogen with concomitant phase of amenorrhea for about 6 to 8 weeks. See here how the pattern of this metropathia hemorrhagica bleeding is. First, what happens, there will be increase in the level of estrogen with concomitant phase of amenorrhea for about 6 to 8 weeks. Patient first complains of amenorrhea for 6 to 8 weeks followed by the heavy bleeding or DUB. As there is no ovulation, the endometrium is under the influence of estrogen without being opposed by the growth limiting progesterone for a prolonged period. So here coming to the changes in the uterus in cases of metropathia hemorrhagica, the variable degree of myohyperplasia with systemic enlargement of the uterus. Here what happens, the myohyperplasia will be there and symmetrical enlargement of the uterus. Symmetrical enlargement means the uterus is enlarged from all the sides. You can see here myohyperplasia will be there and symmetrical enlargement. Symmetrical means from all the sides the uterus is enlarged. Symmetrical. Asymmetrical means from only one side this uterus starts enlarging. But here you can see the symmetrical enlargement and myohyperplasia is be there. This is a normal uterus and this is a uterus of DUB, metropathia hemorrhagica. So you can see the increase in the size of the uterus. Increase uterine size with myohyperplasia. So here what happens, the myohyperplasia will be there with symmetrical enlargement of the uterus to a size of about 8 to 10 weeks due to simultaneous hypertrophy of the muscles. Size is around 8 to 10 weeks, just like the gestational size of 8 to 10 weeks of pregnancy. Same size of the uterus occurs because uterus enlarges and there will be hypertrophy of the muscles. The endometrial changes are classical. On naked eye examination, the endometrium looks thick, congested and often polypoidal. So you can find the endometrium becomes thick, congested and polypoidal, or like multiple polyposis will be there. And microscopical examination, if you go for the microscopical examination, then there will be marked hyperplasia of all the endometrial components. All the endometrial components undergo the hyperplasia. There is, however, intensistic glandular hypertrophy rather than the hyperplasia with marked disparity in the sizes. Some of the glands are smaller, some other larger, giving the appearance of Swiss cheese pattern. Say here, the glands, some glands becomes too small and some glands are very large. So if you look the glands in a microscope, it gives a Swiss cheese pattern, like small and large holes. How in the Swiss cheese there will be small and large holes will be there, which is made in the Switzerland. So similarly, the endometrial glands looks in the microscope, some small and some large glands, just like a Swiss cheese pattern appearance will be there. The glands are empty and lined by the columnar epithelium, and there will be absence of secretory changes, and you will find the areas of necrosis in the superficial layers with simultaneous hemorrhages and leukocytic infiltration will be there. See here, this is a Swiss cheese pattern, endometrium showing Swiss cheese appearance. You can see here the larger glands and the smaller glands, how the endometrial glands look like, giving a appearance of Swiss cheese pattern. Next, coming to the changes in the ovaries, cystic changes will be seen in one or the both ovaries, usually the follicular type of cyst, and the cyst, the fluid in the cyst. Cyst means nothing but a cavity containing the fluid, and here the fluid contains the estrogen, and there is no evidence of corpus luteum. Confusion in the diagnosis, phase of amenorrhea. How to diagnose this metropathia hemorrhagica is, this is very important point. Phase of amenorrhea followed by continued bleeding per vagina with bulky uterus, and it is too confused with disturbed uterine pregnancy or ectopic gestation. So this is the differential diagnosis of this. So similar signs or similar symptoms you will find in even the disturbed uterine pregnancy or ectopic gestation. So you have to rule out this condition first. And in anovulatory DUB, unlike normal menstruation, there is no uniform sloughing of the endometrium up to the basal layer. This results in excessive uterine bleeding. In an anovulatory DUB, there is decreased synthesis of PGF2 alpha and thromboxane. Due to this, the reason the DUB of this type is absolutely painless, because there will not be uterine contraction because of the less prostaglandins ratio. PGF2 alpha is less. So this is the point in diagnosis. First, the phase of amenorrhea followed by the continued bleeding per vagina, and the bulky uterus will be there, and you will find less prostaglandins, and the cycles are usually painless. One more thing is atrophy of the endometrium. Following this type of bleeding, usually for the bleeding occurs, you will find the amenorrhea. That is the atrophy of the endometrium. This type of abnormality is commonly met in postmenopausal women and may occur in reproductive period as the final involutionary state of previous metropathia hemorrhagica. See, if a woman has suffered from the metropathia hemorrhagica, then in the future she may undergo the atrophy of endometrium. The bleeding occurs from the rupture of the dilated capillaries beneath the atrophic surface of the epithelium. The cause of endometrial atrophy may be due to total absence of estrogen or failure of the uterine receptors to become responsive to the estrogen. So next, coming to the endometrial pattern in DUB. The following are the histological patterns found in the DUB. In usually 60% of the cases, the endometrium is in the secretory phase. The normal secretory endometrium you will find in 60% of the patients, and in 30% of the patients you will find the endometrium is hyperplastic, and in the remaining 30 you will find the shedding, irregular wrapping and atrophic patterns of the endometrium. So coming to the investigations of DUB. Investigations aim for to confirm the menstrual abnormalities as stated by the patient, to exclude the systemic, iatrogenic and organic pelvic pathology, to identify the possible etiology of DUB, to work out the definitive therapy or treatment protocol. These are the aims of investigations. Coming to the history. Firstly, it is to be confirmed that the bleeding is through the vagina and not from the urethra and the rectum. So you have to confirm the bleeding is coming from the uterus and through the vagina. This is very important. And next is the statement of excessive bleeding is to be assessed by the number of pads used, passage of clots, size and number, and the duration of bleeding. So you have to assess whether the bleeding is heavy or not by asking the patient the number of pads she used, passage of clots, and the duration of bleeding. If ambiguity is found from the estimated HB percentage, it is better to assess the blood loss by admitting the patient during the period. Among the patients presenting with the menorrhagia, only about 50% patient got excess blood loss, which is more than 80 ml. Next is the nature of the menstrual abnormalities is to be inquired. Yeah, how the nature of menstrual abnormality is there, whether it is cyclic or acyclic, its relation to the puberty, pregnancy event, or last cycle, normal cycle, any emotional upset history or psychosocial problem she had is to be elicited tactfully, and use of any steroidal contraceptives or IUCD insertion should be encouraged. History of abnormal bleeding from the injury side, epistaxis, gum bleeding that suggestive of PID should be encouraged. So any history of abnormal bleeding is there, that also is to be asked. So history taking is very, very important. Next, coming to the internal examination. After history, you have to go for the examination. In the internal examination, bimanual examination using speculum examination should be done in all cases except in the virgins, where the rectal examination is to be done to exclude the palpable pelvic pathology. So you can go for the speculum examination except in the virgin girls. In vaginal, if vaginal examination is required in virgins, it should be done under the general anesthesia along with the endometrial curettage. Then coming to the special investigations. Here the special investigations are first the blood volumes or the nor complete hemogram you can go for. So like here hemoglobin estimation is done in every case. Serum ferritin test is not done as a routine. Then in cases of puberty, menorrhagia, you can go for the platelet count, BTCT, that is bleeding time, clotting time, partial thromboplastin time, etc. In suspected cases of thyroid dysfunction, you can go for the thyroid profile, TSH, T3, T4, etc. Then ultrasound and color Doppler. Ultrasound, here you will find usually in the ultrasound you will come to know the endometrial hyperplasia, that is the endometrial thickness. If it is more than 12 mm, then you can call it as a endometrial hyperplasia. Hyperechoic and regular outline, angiogenesis and neovascular signal. TVS ultrasound, if you go for the transvaginal sonography, it's very sensitive to detect any anatomical abnormalities like fibroid, adenomyosis of the uterus, endometrial and adnexate. Next, saline infusion sonography. Yes, it is very important to diagnose the uterine pathology, especially the endometrial polyps, submucous fibroids, uterine abnormalities, etc. Then hysteroscopy, yes, it is very important for the better evaluation of endometrium lesion, and you can simultaneously take the biopsy from the offending side under the direct vision, so you can directly see and you can directly take the biopsy. The frequent finding of polyps and submucous fibroids are often missed by the blind curettage. If you are doing only the D&C blind curettage, where you cannot see the endometrium and the inside of the uterus in the D&C procedure, so the hysteroscopy is very good compared to the D&C, because you can directly visualize the interior of the uterus, and you can, if you find any lesion, you can directly take the biopsy from that lesion. So it is considered as superior to the blind procedure of D&C, dilatation and curettage. Next is the endometrial sampling. Yes, here you have to take a sample of the endometrium by a Pipal sampler or any endometrial sampling instrument, and it is also a blind procedure. Intrauterine pathology cannot be detected. Laparoscopy to exclude unsuspected pelvic pathology such as endometriosis, PID or ovarian tumor. This is considered as the best one. The indication is urgent if associated with the pelvic pain. If she is complaining of severe pelvic pain and you are not able to diagnose the pathology, pelvic pathology, in other methods of investigation like ultrasonography and saline infusion and all, hysteroscopy, you can go for laparoscopy, which is considered as a superior, especially to diagnose the PID cases and endometriosis. Next is D&C, diagnostic uterine curettage, is indicated in DUB to exclude the organic lesion in the endometrium and to determine the functional state of the endometrium and to have incidental therapeutic benefit. So it can also give a therapeutic benefit because you are removing the endometrium of the uterus. So excessive endometrium is removed, thus leading to the stoppage of the bleeding. So it acts as a both diagnosis as well as therapeutic procedure. In adolescent DUB, it is rarely needed only if the bleeding fails to stop or is severe in nature. So during childbearing period 20 to 40 years, it should be done if the bleeding is acyclic. It's about the D&C procedure. During premenopausal, the diagnostic curettage is mandatory prior to any therapy to exclude the endometrial malignancy. See, in the premenopausal and postmenopausal period, the curettage is very important to rule out the endometrial cancer or the endometrial malignancy. So during postmenopausal period, it is mandatory to exclude the endometrial malignancy. So in these age groups, it's very compulsory to go for the D&C procedure to rule out the endometrial malignancy. Okay, and this is usually done, and the endometrial sample can be sent for the histological examination. It is done as an OPD procedure without any anesthesia. Yes, coming to the management. Because of the diverse etiology of DUB in different phases of women's life, the management protocols have been grouped accordingly. Age-wise, it is divided, like puberty and adolescent menorrhagia, which is less than 20 years of age. Reproductive age is 20 to 40 years. Premenopausal is more than 40 years of age, and postmenopausal is after attaining the menopause. So first you have to see the age and you have to decide which treatment suits better for that age group patients. So reproductive period, it is the management is divided into three headings: general, medical and surgical management. Coming to first the general management, here the rest is advised during the bleeding phase. Whenever the bleeding is occurring, at that period rest is advised. Assurance and sympathetic handling of the patient, usually if they are adolescent age less than 20 years, are very important. Anemia should be corrected energetically by giving a proper diet, hematinics, and even by giving the blood transfusion. So clinically evident systemic or endocrinal abnormalities should be investigated and treated properly. Then coming to the medical management. So DUB in majority responds well to the conservative treatment during the adolescence and early reproductive period. The medical management is divided into two. First is a non-hormonal method and another one is the hormonal method. Non-hormonal is by without using any hormones, which is the first line of treatment. Second one is the hormonal method by giving hormones. So coming to first the non-hormonal treatment or the management of DUB. So non-hormonal management includes the following. First is the Fibrinolytic agents like the use of tranexamic acid, which reduces the blood loss by 50%. It counteracts the endometrial fibrinolytic system. So it is particularly indicated in IUCD induced menorrhagia. So here you have to give tranexamic acid, antifibrinolytic agent. Second is PSI, that is the prostaglandin synthetase inhibitors, which is a very famous commonly used is mefenamic acid. Mefenamic acid is much effective in a women age more than 35 years and cases of ovulatory DUB. In cases of ovulatory DUB and the women age more than 35, this PSI is a prostaglandin synthetase inhibitors or mefenamic acid is very useful. The dose is 150 to 600 mg orally in divided doses during the bleeding phase. And third is desmopressin. It is a synthetic analog of arginine vasopressin. It is specially indicated in cases of hematological problems like deficiency of factor 8 and von Willebrand's disease. It is given IV 0.3 mg per kg or intranasally can be given to stop the bleeding. So these all includes the non-hormonal management of the DUB, which is the first line of treatment. Antifibrinolytic agents like tranexamic acid, PSIs, prostaglandin synthetase inhibitors like mefenamic acid and desmopressin. So now coming to the hormonal management, that is with the use of hormones, how to control the bleeding. Hormones, yes. With the introduction of potent orally active progestins, they became the mainstay in the management of DUB in all age groups, particularly replaced the isolated use of estrogens and progesterone. So here the DUB, first in the DUB, the active progestins plays a very important role. Progestins, the common preparations of progestins or progesterones are norethestérone acetate or medroxyprogesterone acetate. So the preparations are used in a way. How to use this preparation of progestins or the estrogen and progesterone combination? There are two methods: cyclic therapy and continuous therapy. First, coming to the cyclic therapy. Cyclic therapy includes the two variations. One is from the 5th to 25th day of course and another is 15th to 25th day of course. So cyclic therapy. Cyclic therapy is from the 5th to 25th day course. In ovular bleeding, and so any type of low dose combined oral pills which contains estrogen as well as progesterone in a low quantity are effective when given from the 5th to 25th day of a cycle for 3 consecutive cycles. It causes endometrial atrophy and it is more effective compared to the only progesterone therapy because as it suppresses the HPO axis more effectively. So this combined low dose combined oral pills are considered as more effective compared to the only progesterone therapy. So normal menstruation is expected to resume with restoration of normal functioning pituitary ovarian endometrial axis. It reduces the menstrual blood loss by 50% and it serves as a contraceptive as well. So it also gives an additional benefit of contraception. Along with that, it reduces the menstrual blood loss by 50%. Second is another one is cyclic therapy. One more method is there from the 15th to 25th day course. In ovular bleeding where the patient wants pregnancy and in cases of irregular shedding or irregular ripening of the endometrium, you can give the progesterone for a very short period, that is starting from the 15th day to the 25th day. Dydrogesterone 1 tablet 10 mg daily or twice a day from the 15th to 25th day may cure this condition, and this regimen is less effective than the 5th to 25th day course. However, it does not suppress the ovulation. The good thing is here it is not suppressing the ovulation. Okay, it is not giving the additional contraceptive benefit because it is given in a patient who wants pregnancy, who is not willing for any contraception effect, but they want pregnancy, but in the bleeding is high. So you can go give the progesterone only in the luteal phase. Okay, adolescent anovulatory women have immaturity of HPO axis. They are ideal for use of short-term cyclic therapy until the maturity of the positive feedback system is established. And even this is very good in cases of adolescent because in those adolescent anovulatory cases there will be immaturity of HPO axis. So in such cases also it is very beneficial. So 15 to 25th day course is useful in ovular bleeding where the patient wants pregnancy, and in cases of irregular shedding and irregular ripening, which occurs in functional type of menorrhagia in ovular type of DUB. This is very effective. Next is the continuous progestins. You have to give the progestins continuously. Progestins inhibits the pituitary gonadotrophin secretion and ovarian hormone production. Here a commonly used progestin is medroxyprogesterone acetate. 10 mg thrice daily is given, and the treatment is usually continued for at least 90 days. And next is the estrogen. So as you know, the estrogen is to be given when the progestins fails to control the bleeding or the combined pills fails to control the bleeding. So estrogen in situation where the bleeding is acute and very severe, conjugated estrogen 25 mg is given IV. It helps with the rapid growth of the endometrium and promotes the platelet adhesions. It controls the bleeding by the process of healing, and it may be repeated every 4 hours till the bleeding is controlled. And then when the bleeding is controlled, then you can go for the oral therapy of the combined estrogen and progesterone pills. Next is the intrauterine progesterone. Yes, this is one of the way to give progesterone, that is by the insertion of intrauterine device, LNGIUS. Levonorgestrone intrauterine system is introduced inside the uterus, and this is the system which releases levonorgestrone hormone, and it induces the endometrial atrophy and endometrial cell inactivation. So it can be kept inside the uterus for a duration of 5 years. It has a minimum systemic absorption, and reduction of blood loss is up to 97%. It is also considered as medical hysterectomy, just like removing uterus. How the condition will be there after removing uterus, similar condition occurs by inserting the LNG-IUS system. In addition to it has other health benefits, and it also gives an effective contraceptive measure. So LNG-IUS is recommended as a first line therapy for a woman with HMG, that is heavy menstrual bleeding, in the absence of any structural or hormonal pathology. Next is the danazol. This is situated in cases with recurrent symptoms and in patient waiting for hysterectomy. If you want to if you want to go for hysterectomy in such patients, like who have completed their families and aged patients, in them you can go for danazol. The dose is 200 to 400 mg daily in 4 divided doses continuously for 3 months. A smaller dose tend to minimize the blood loss, whereas if in a higher dose it produces the amenorrhea. It reduces the blood loss by 60%. Another one is mifepristone RU486. It is an antiprogesterone. It inhibits the ovulation and thus induces amenorrhea and reduces the myoma size also. And last is the GnRH agonist. You can also give the GnRH agonist to stop the cycles. Next, coming to the surgical management of DUB. So this completed the medical management, general management, medical management, and the last major is the surgical management of DUB. So it's of three types again: uterine curettage, endometrial ablation or resection, and hysterectomy. First, coming to the uterine curettage, it is done predominantly as a diagnostic tool for elderly women, but at times it has got hemostatic as well as a therapeutic effect by removing the necrosed unhealthy endometrium. See, while doing DNC, dilatation and curettage, we curate the entire endometrial cavity. Thus we are removing the necrosed and unhealthy or the additional endometrium. So after doing the DNC, the bleeding stops sometimes. So it is not only the diagnostic, it as well as it has a therapeutic effect also. It should be done following ultrasonography for the detection of endometrial pathology, and whatever the sample you have taken after doing DNC, it can be sent for the histopathological investigation, and you can see the endometrial pathology. The indication is an urgent one if the bleeding is acyclic and where the endometrial pathology is suspected. Ideally, hysteroscopy and directed biopsy should be considered both for the purpose of diagnosis and therapeutic. Presently, dilatation and curettage should be used neither as a diagnostic tool nor for the purpose of therapy, because nowadays hysteroscopy have come, no. So hysteroscopy is replaced these blind procedures of D&C, but the D&C procedure is very common where the hysteroscope is not available. Hysteroscope is not available, so this procedure is very common. But compared to this procedure, hysteroscopy directed biopsy is considered as superior, because there we can directly visualize the pathology and we can take the biopsy. Next is the endometrial ablation or resection. Indications are failed medical treatment, women who do not wish to preserve menstrual or reproductive function, uterus is normal size or not bigger than 10 weeks pregnancy size, small uterine fibroids less than 3 cm, women who want to avoid longer surgery, and the woman who prefers to preserve her uterus. So these are the indications of endometrial ablation or resection. So it is better to go for endometrial ablation and resection in these type of women who are not willing to go for hysterectomies, okay, and who wants to preserve their uterus. So there are different methods of endometrial ablations. So there are different methods of endometrial ablation. First one is the laser ablation method. Laser ablation of the endometrium using the ND-LAG laser through hysteroscope, which is considered as an alternative to hysterectomy. Here the laser beams are passed and it is employed as an elective alternative to hysterectomy, where the hysterectomy has been medically contraindicated. Here what happened, with the help of a laser, tissue destruction is done up to a depth of 4 to 5 mm. So in the endometrium is destroyed up to a depth of 4 to 5 mm, which produces a therapeutic Asherman syndromes. Asherman syndromes where the adhesions will be there, which is a therapeutic Asherman syndromes, and ultimately leading to the amenorrhea, because in Asherman syndromes there will be amenorrhea. So with the help of laser we are destroying the endometrium up to 4 to 5 mm depth, and thus producing a therapeutic Asherman syndromes. And when the endometrium is destroyed, leading to the amenorrhea, there will not be any bleeding. The method should be employed in cases who have completed their families. Another method of ablation is uterine thermal balloon ablation. This is used for the destruction of endometrium, is currently based with the satisfactory result. Endometrium is destroyed using a thermal balloon with a hot normal saline of 87 degrees Celsius for 8 to 10 minutes. No dilatation of the cervical canal is needed here. The procedure is suitable for women who are not suitable for general anesthesia or long duration surgery, and the success rate is similar to that of TCRE, which is nothing but the transcervical resection of the endometrium, where through the continuous flow resectoscope is introduced, and there the resectoscope loop is to be used to remove the basal layer of the endometrium along with the superficial layer of myometrium. And here it is same like that of TCRE. No pre-treatment endometrial thinning is required in this case, and this is considered as the first line therapy and is done on the day care basis. And there are different methods of ablation: microwave endometrial ablation, NovaSure, transcervical ablation, and roller ball ablation. So there are different methods of destroying the endometrium. So this is a NovaSure method. You can see here this NovaSure is an instrument which is introduced here. So you can see here the balloon is introduced inside the uterine cavity, and here using the syringe, fluid is injected through the catheter, inflating the balloon. So here the fluid is injected and this balloon is inflated, and then the heater raises the fluid temperature. With the help of a heater, the fluid temperature is raised, and when this raised or the heated fluid is introduced into the uterine cavity, the endometrial lining just adjacent to the balloon is destroyed. So this is a method of destroying the endometrial using the uterine thermal balloon method. So commonly used is a NovaSure instrument. This is a transcervical resection method. I see through the cervix we are resecting the endometrium with the help of a resectoscope. So here through a continuous flow resectoscope is introduced, and it is less costlier than the laser ablation. It can be carried out even under the paracervical block. Resectoscope loop is remove the basal, help to remove the basal layer of endometrium along with the superficial layer of myometrium. So this is called as transcervical resection of the endometrium, TCRE procedure. This is the endometrial ablation method. The device is introduced here. Ablation device is introduced inside the uterine cavity through the cervix, and radiofrequency is used. This is a uterine curettage method, DNC. This is a common procedure. Uterine is curated with the help of a uterine curate. This you can see endometrium is curated with the help of a uterine curate. Same DNC method. This is the uterine thermal balloon method, uterine balloon ablation. But this is one type of endometrial ablation using a thermal balloon filled with the heated fluid to destroy the lining of the uterus. Same method. Then one more method is called as uterine artery embolization. Embolization, this is commonly done in a woman with large uterine fibroid more than 3 cm with heavy bleeding. Here the polyvinyl alcohol microspheres are injected. Polyvinyl alcohol microspheres are injected to block the uterine artery. Here we are using a particles of polyvinyl alcohol microspheres to block the uterine artery through a catheter in the through the femoral artery. We pass a catheter, and these particles are injected to block the uterine artery under the local anesthesia. So this shrinkens the fibroid. Whenever the blood supply to the fibroid is reduced, the fibroid cannot grow further, so thus leads to the shrinkage of the fibroid, and it controls the bleeding, and this is considered as a safe and effective method. So this is usually indicated in the larger uterine fibroid, because fibroids are one of the cause of abnormal uterine bleeding. So if the fibroids are larger, this method is used, called as uterine artery embolization. And the last last surgical method to control bleeding is nothing but hysterectomy. Hysterectomy is nothing but removing the surgical removal of the uterus. It is not recommended as a first line therapy for heavy menstrual bleeding. Always remember, hysterectomy is not at all a first line treatment to treat or to control the heavy menstrual bleeding or any DUB or any AUB, but this is considered as a last surgical method. Okay, so it is not recommended as a first line therapy for heavy menstrual bleeding, HMB or DUB, dysfunction uterine bleeding. However, hysterectomy is justified when the conservative treatment fails or contracts and the blood loss impairs the health and quality of life. Presence of endometrial hyperplasia and ATP on the endometrial histology is an indication for hysterectomy. The decision can be made as the patient is approaching 40 years. So if the patient is 40 or more than 40 years and if she has completed family, then you can go for hysterectomy to reduce the bleeding. Hysterectomy can be done depending on the route of by vaginal, abdominal or laparoscopic assisted vaginal method. So this completes DUB. Dysfunctional in uterine bleeding is a term where there is no obvious cause of menorrhagia, and so in Ayurveda it can be correlated with the Rakta Yoni or Asriktara. Thank you, students.